once, Reading weren't the club in crisis on Saturday as Jose Gomes secured a first win against a fragmented Nottingham Forest team that finished with just 9 men. Will it prove to be the catalyst for survival, or just one of too few happy moments for fans to look back on come May? Welcome to the Tilehurst End podcast. That's the question we're going to be answering in episode 181 as old friend joins me for this episode of the show. Marc Mayo, your host as per usual, joined by Dan Wimbush, the founder of the Tilehurst End, who has dropped back in. His young daughter is nestled up in bed asleep, so he's found a quick moment to come down and discuss all things Reading FC.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for allowing me back in through the doggy door. It's nice to appear back on the show. 181 now. God.
I know that episode 200 is starting to get on my mind now as to what possibly we can do for some sort of double century. But I haven't actually worked out when it'll be yet. I suppose it's in 19 weeks' time.
Yeah, well, episode 1 was, I think, August of 2013 now. So, closing in on five and a half, nearly 6 years. Time has literally flown. I've seen it out the window. It's flying past. And, on to 200. And
we've had we've had a good season in that 6 years. We've enjoyed ourselves maybe once or twice occasionally, but I think at the moment we can hopefully look towards a decent relegation. Maybe not a great escape, but we're on the start of something maybe.
Yeah, I would settle for a pedestrian, boring escape where we just consistently pick up points over the next few weeks and just slowly drag ourselves clear of the table. But ultimately, whether it's that or escaping by goal difference on the final day of the season, I will take anything at the moment because I'm not up for the season in League One. I'm quite happy where we are.
Yeah, well, it's a good chance to discuss it tonight as we're watching. Anyone keeping their eye on sports news on Monday evening will see the life we could have had as David Wagner leaves Huddersfield and that penalty kick and all the things that surround it really made me wonder what life would be like. Maybe it would be saying goodbye to a manager near the bottom of a table, like if we had won that game. Can't imagine what that'd possibly be like. So let's crack on then, talk about our 2-0 win over Nottingham Forest in the recap.
View from the Tilehurst End, recapping this week's championship action.
So when this seemed like the perfect time to play Nottingham Forest, and it proved just to be that with Karanka going and a lot of kind of dodginess going on around the club, and really it was so nice to have that foot on the other boot, as it were, where we're the team that's actually relatively stable and optimistic going into a game, and they just collapsed before us.
Yeah, I mean, Forest, as they have been for pretty much the last decade, just an absolute up and down yo-yo club, and just internally, let alone externally. And with Karanka going on the Friday, walking out, everything did seem set up for Reading to actually go on and do something. I think the performance we'd had at Old Trafford gave us that nice little reset that we needed after the absolute shambles that we saw at Swansea. So you really did feel that for once, like you said, Reading were actually the team on the up and Forest were the team on the down. And, you went into this Reading with 23rd in the table, Forest were top 10. You really wouldn't have known that at all. They did very much seem like two evenly matched teams.
Yeah, and it seems like the one worry I kind of have with it is that it did take us till the 87th minute for an own goal to seal the game, and then Forest, the 2 red cards came on the 63rd minute and the 83rd minute. So the second half really it did hold them back from having that big push, and Reading survives the moments when we have been conceding, i.e. the start and the end of the second half, which is nice. But what do you take from the fact that it took us to the 87th minute to win the game? Because I admit I'm not too worried by it at the moment, because you don't have a team that fails to score so consistently then suddenly turn it on, because we weren't watching the team over the last 5-6 weeks thinking, this team's unlucky they're not scoring, they'll score 6 one week. We weren't getting that sense at all, and to actually get it over the line with 2-0, it wasn't too surprising that it took us so long. Yeah,
I mean, I think it was Steve Clarke coined the term towards his first season, saying we were stuck in a circle of negativity, a spiral of negativity.
Is that anything similar to the fact that the positivity of being positive is positive, or whatever?
The anti-Adkins, who doesn't seem to be doing too badly for himself at Hull at the moment, but I'm sure we'll touch on that later. But no, this team, quite frankly, has sucked for so long. They've forgotten how to win games. When you're out of that habit of winning games. You don't, and you could see the indecision in their mind. Was it, do I keep going forward? Do I keep pressing? Do we stay back? Do we try and soak up some pressure? Forest, especially when they went down to 10 men, were almost in that, well, we've got nothing. Going down to 10 men was almost bad for Reading because they were on that, well, we've got absolutely nothing to lose now. And Reading, it just increased the nerves because everybody in the stadium was sat there thinking, if we can't beat Forest with 10 men and 1-0 up, we're never going to win a game. My dad was sitting next to me, Wim Senior, and saying, if we don't win this, that's it. To get any sort of motivation and positivity out of players is just going to be tough.
You know, and even at 9 men, I was sitting there. Was it against Yeovil like 4 or 5 years ago? We drew 1-1 against a team. I think they had 8 men even. And it reminded me of that so much when you have a result in a season that just sums up why you're not going to achieve anything. And at 9 men, I thought if Forest come back and nick a point with 9 men, then that really, 10 men's bad, but 9 men would have just been, you'd put the R next to the team already.
I've never thought we were going to get relegated this season, but if we'd conceded and not won that game, I think for the first time I would have gone, right, that's us. My sort of scales would have tipped towards we're going to get relegated rather than we're not going to get relegated. But look, nothing but positives here. We did go on and score the second goal. Admittedly, thank you very much, Mr. Robinson, for it. And I think the only negative, if I have a tiny shred of negative, was I wanted us to go on after that second goal and really get a third or fourth, because who knows what goal difference will be towards the end of the season. I did think there was that opportunity to get that third or fourth. But again, you could kind of understand wanting to keep something in the tank. And, I love the fact that, we only had 5 minutes of stoppage time when there clearly should have been 6 or 7. I think it was one of those mercy moments from the fourth official. And Forest are very happy to see the end of the game. So, yeah, and let's not forget the fact we had chances, Mark. That was a good thing as well. I mean, Barrow was through 1-on-1 and fluffed it. We had headers. We had lots of sort of half chances we were creating. This wasn't one of those games, particularly that we saw under Clement at the end of last year, where we had one effort from miles away, that Shoni Aluko goal against QPR. And then we hung on. This wasn't a complete backs to the wall effort. This wasn't wave after wave of Forest attacks that Reading were just about held on to. We deserved to win over 90 minutes before we were down to 10 men. Sorry, before Forest was down to 10 men, and then especially afterwards. This was a game where you could have no complaints as a Forest fan saying, okay, fair enough, Reading won this. I'm not saying it was a 75% dominating Reading performance, but it was certainly a 60-40, even if you wanted to be generous to Forest, 55-45.
Yeah, and on that goal difference note, actually, Reading -11 at the moment. Much better, actually, than Ipswich and Bolton, who are in the 20s, and Rotherham -17. So Paul Clement's keeping us, making sure we lost each game by just 1 goal has had its benefits to some extent, as we look forward to what will, as it looks to be a very tight relegation battle. On the positivity note then, we did say after the United game it was a good performance against Man United, but I wasn't convinced that the way we played against Man United would necessarily win a championship game, as the ability to score goals and the defensive nature and how we actually hold out under pressure. What improvements did you see between that United game and the Forest game? Because it certainly sounded like John Swift had a considerably better game at the Medeski than he did back at Old Trafford.
Yeah, I mean, it's the twofold factor. I think we had more teeth up front. Bodvarsson, I've always liked Bodvarsson, and it was great to see him back in there. And Ovie Ejaria showing why Reading have gone out and got another midfielder, because he's just something a bit different. He's almost like the Rinamotor of the final third of the pitch. He was constantly buzzing about. Yes, he faded badly in the second half, but in that first half, he always wanted the ball. He was pulling defenders around, and that really played into someone like Swift's hands. And Swift, since Rinamotor's been in the side as well, Swift is now, and with Bacuna behind him as well, he's now got that freedom to be that number 10, to just sort of lurk around, make those runs into the box, as he did when he first signed it. In all, that game reminded me of the sort of feeling I had after the Preston game, Yapstam's very first home game. For me, it felt very much like that, where it was a solid Reading performance, not one that was going to make a highlight DVD that you'd keep and constantly dust off on the shelf, but it felt very much like a really positive building block, and that's the kind of football that Gomes wants to play. And having those creative players like Swift and Ejaria up against let's face it, a much weaker defence than Manchester United, even a weaker Man United side at home, just played into our hands. And hopefully, I don't think we're the finished article in that final third. But again, a big step forward, and it's a sort of a unit that you could see getting those 1 or 2 goals a game. Whereas, with the greatest respects to the people that started up at Old Trafford, and I, I've got a lot of time for Danny Loader and his potential, and let alone what people like McCleary have done in the past, and Callum Harriott and the effort and enthusiasm he brings. But this was a definite upgrade. This was going from a sort of a 6 out of 10 unit to at least a 7 out of 10 unit.
It does feel for me like the best thing for Danny Loader to be at the moment is an impact sub.
100%.
And that is how a lot of good players start their career. And with his energy and his obvious technicality, he can make a bit more use. And it seems like that decision making, certainly at Old Trafford it was the decision making, but as you say, against better defenders. But that extra little second that it takes him to maybe decide what he's going to do is he's going to have that in the last 20 minutes compared to the first 70. It was interesting that we had Yaku Mate and Callum Harriott were both injured for the Forest game. Liam Kelly just appeared to be dropped. It seemed it sounded like a tactical decision from Jose Gomes, who had Lewis Baker on the bench and came on for the final 10 minutes, although he'd only had 2 training sessions. And when you combine that with a back 5 that's looking pretty settled, Tyler Blackett was back on the bench even though his suspension had ended. He wasn't preferred to Omar Richards. It does seem like there's a bit of a consistent team selection coming with Gomes, with that back 5 particularly. And Ajario, I can't imagine is going to be taken out of the team after his game. I can't imagine Bodvarsson is going to be taken out of the team. And finally, with the sort of frills and the wingers probably on a bit more of a rotation, you actually get a bit of a consistent team selection and a consistent tactical selection that Reading haven't had since the playoff season with Jaap Stam almost.
Well, this is just it, and it's one of the things that used to drive us mad under Paul Clement, was that every game, 2, 3 changes, 4 changes, 5 changes, and even if we'd played well, and the Championship's a demanding league, and yada yada yada, but other teams aren't doing that. The best teams aren't doing that. You have to make the odd change here and there, and you might make a tiny tactical tweak, but what fans are desperate to see is Reading getting back to, this is how Reading play. This is how we want to play. You try and stop us. Not try and be overly clever, trying to outthink the opposition. Get your team, set it up, and say, come on, beat us. And occasionally you're going to have to tweak that. But look at what Steve Coppell and Brian McDermott did the best. You knew what that team and that setup was going to be like game after game, and they didn't change it unless there was a particularly big game. You remember Coppell on the first day at Manchester United. That type of performance, then you change it. But you're right. And the unit, and that's why I'm not Omar Richards' biggest fan at the moment. I think he's going to struggle to really stick at this level. And again, I'm very much hope I'm wrong on that, and he's just a sort of a late bloomer. But I really appreciate the fact that Gomes is giving him every opportunity as a proper left back to play in that role. So even if Richards doesn't make it, you just plug in and play another proper left back, be that Jordan Abita, whoever they sign on loan, rather than doing what Clement was doing, Stan was doing, fudging it, putting a Yeardom or a Gunter in at left back or a Blackett in at left back. Yeah, exactly. So I really like the fact that he's just going, this is how I want to play. This is my system. I'm going to keep my faith in you guys as much as I can. But maybe I'll be completely wrong now.
That's the thing. It still is early days, isn't it? And that's why there's a lot of love for Jose Gomes on Twitter and everything. And we'll say what he said in his post-match comments in a minute. And his comments are good. But that's the thing. It is still very early days. And I'm kind of holding back at the moment just a little bit, because it appears like he relishes the academy side of things. And I completely agree with what you're saying on Richards, although I probably do rate him a little bit more than you do by the sound of things. But that's the problem. We can very easily be talking in a week's time about how he's put Blackett back at centre back and maybe dropped Renham Hotter to right back permanently, and then it all kind of crumbles, doesn't it? That's almost how it's been the last few years with these managers for us.
Yeah, and look, if that happens, it happens. And look, maybe he'll be better at doing the whole tweaking thing than Clement and Stan was in his second season, and it works for him. It can work. Other teams do it, and it works. But for me, it's my own personal preference, and I think a lot of Reading fans, probably because we saw it during our greatest of times, and loads of successful teams do it. You just want to see that consistency, and for every change to make sense, because a lot of the time under Clement and Stam, you were going, well, why have you done that? And even after the game, you were sat there thinking, well why have you done that? And those type of not making sense. Football should be simple, and fans should be able to follow it. And you don't have to agree with every decision that the manager makes, but you should at least be able to go, oh, yeah, well, he's put him in because we're up against 2 6'5" centre-backs today and we want something more physical. Or just, like Manchester United were at Tottenham on Sunday. Look, he's played 2 pacey forwards and not played Lukaku because he wants to hit the team quickly on the break. You should be able to see that as at least a mildly educated football fan. And so far, touch wood, we're getting that from Gomes. And I think that is one of the big reasons why there's a lot of goodwill behind him.
Yeah, I did actually write a piece for the Tilehurst End in the week for the website saying how the club are actually backing this sort of style of football again with Ajari and Baker, 2 players that if you'd have said at the start of the window the first 2 signings would have been technical centre midfielders, I probably wouldn't have said brilliant. But the fact is that it's actually suiting his style and actually, dying by the sword, which we haven't had. If you think that after the playoff final season under Stam, who wanted to play that style of football, we signed Bakuna and Dave Edwards, which ain't it.
Don't you think, and this is one of the things that I read when a lot of people were criticising the fact that we were signing central midfielders, do you not think that when you actually go back and look, for years now it's been the midfield that's the problem? And yes, we've signed lots of players, but we've never had the right mix of players, because how many players, Mark, have we had up front, good strikers, the Grabbans, the Vidras of this world, that just haven't done anything here? And it's because they're not getting the service. How many times have we sat there and been discussing player ratings? We're talking online and we're like, well, say, for example, John Dudley Budvarson's 6. And then we said, well, he didn't have a lot of service, did he? What more could he do?
Barely touched the ball. And as a striker, like Vidra and Graben, how many times have you seen a through ball down the middle on the ground?
Exactly.
A striker in the past 7 to even 20 years almost.
Exactly.
Nicky Forster sort of times.
And you can have, again, the best sort of, how many goals would Adam Lafondra be getting in this side? But certainly, in the last few weeks before Gomes has hopefully sorted things out, not a lot. I can't see a Kevin Dorr getting any goals. Dave Kitson would probably be just as isolated in this team because Kitson wasn't a great player for carving out his own chances. Maybe a Nicky Forster or a Shane Long might do a bit more, but those players are, what are we talking now? 20 years since Forster arrived, so I've only rattled off 2 in 20 years. So you can't expect those to come along very often.
No, absolutely. So where does the sort of the relegation thoughts at the moment settle then? Because we're 2 points off safety, but Ipswich, Wigan and Brentford all won on the weekend. It's difficult because at the moment we're not really playing many crunch games in the next few weeks because we go away to Derby and then so then we go to Bolton away, which I suppose is a bit of a crunch game, and then we host Villa. But it's a bit difficult to really see, that we're going to get a chance because we've lost to Millwall, we've fluffed our lines away to Rotherham, we've fluffed our lines at home to Ipswich, we've fluffed our lines at home to Bolton. Those crunch games which we now want to be coming up, apart from that Bolton game, we're not really getting a chance, and it means we're going to have to go to places like Derby and the rest of it and actually try and find some points, which is much more difficult in a relegation battle.
Yeah, but the great thing about a relegation battle as opposed to a promotion battle is that you don't need to be as ruthlessly consistent because teams around you are just going to keep dropping points. I'm looking at the form guide now. Rotherham have won 1 in 5. Ipswich have won 1 in 5. Bolton have won 1 in 5. Reading have won 1 in 5. Then you can go, Millwall run a fairly decent run, 3 in 5.
But just lost on the weekend.
Yeah, but then the 2 teams above them, Preston and Wigan. Preston haven't won in 5 and Wigan have won 1 out of their last 5. Look at what's happened. I touched on it earlier. Look what's happened to Hull, who came to the Medeski Stadium a couple of months ago, and I thought they were utterly, utterly awful. We smashed them. And how often have we said that in recent? We smashed them. And Hull, a 10th in the table, they've rattled off, 6 wins in a row? And they're 16 points clear of the relegation zone. I don't expect Reading to rattle off 6 wins in a row. But even if Reading, out of those next sort of few games, point at Derby, win at Bolton, point against Villa, win at Sheffield Wednesday, suddenly that's 8 points for Reading. And can you see other teams picking up, more than 4 or 5 points in that time? I'm being overly optimistic, I know, but it doesn't take a lot to really turn around and get out of that relegation zone. And for me, looking ahead at those next few fixtures, Derby, fairly irrelevant as long as we don't completely capitulate Swansea style. Bolton, just don't lose it. Get something against Villa. Sheffield Wednesday, meh, bonus. And then there's 5 games that follow. Blackburn at home, Sheffield United away, Rotherham at home, Ipswich away, Wigan at home. And Reading, that's where survival or relegation is going to be set. Because, if we get beat against Ipswich and Wigan and Rotherham, well, it's pretty much going to be night-night nurse. So, it is a crunch time. It's just about keeping some sort of momentum, even if it's like we had at Old Trafford where we get beat, but you go, you know what, we had a load of chances and played well that day.
Yeah, and the fact is, when we play those, when we have Rotherham come down to us and we go to Bolton and we go to Ipswich, at some point we are going to drop points against those teams. We're not going to win them all by any stretch of the imagination. So it is going to require patience, I suppose, is the message here, isn't it, really? We've got 19 games to go. We're not going to be safe of relegation by game 36 or game 40 even. It's going to probably take to minimum 42, 43 to build up any kind of buffer. And, if you said to me now that we're going into the 46th game of the season with a 3-point gap and dodgy goal difference, then you might well take it. I don't know who the last game of the season is against, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
We are home to Birmingham, which is a very winnable game. But I remember the last time we played Birmingham at home with something on the line, it didn't go particularly well. So fingers crossed we're not at that stage. And I look at the fixtures and the final few games. We've got West Brom at home and Middlesbrough away in that last three. So we don't really want to be needing too much from there. But it's just about steadily collecting points. And the other thing as well is you look at the teams around us and do you expect them to massively strengthen? Ipswich might throw a little bit of money at it.
I think they've already signed like 5 players, but I don't think I've heard of any of them.
Exactly. I think James Collins has pitched up there, I saw as well.
Or Keane, who's always been a perennial loan nobody.
Yeah, linked with us loads as well. But so Ipswich might get a couple in, but they're already 5 points behind us. Bolton are in absolute...
They're more likely to be liquidated than they are to sign a player.
The argument between their chairman and the Forest Green chairman is absolute comedy gold. But I think it tells you all you need to know, and I do feel for Parky and everyone there.
Oh, yeah.
Rotherham let's face it, they haven't got the money. They're relying on team spirit and hoping to get over the line. But they really struggle to score goals. 25 all season. You feel it's just a matter of time before they get sucked in. And then maybe one of those other sort of teams that are above it. I mean, you can go anywhere, I think, down from Sheffield Wednesday in 16th. Brentford, Preston, Wigan, Millwall. Any one of those could easily get sucked in on a bad run.
They're not going to suddenly emerge with an under 21 English talent who's going to. Either get £10 million to spend in the market, or they'll sign them from the lower leagues and they'll turn into the next Jamie Vardy. It's highly unlikely.
Exactly. Whereas Reading have already gone outside a Liverpool player and a Chelsea player on loan. And yes, as has been discussed, you can point holes and question marks around those players and what they've just done earlier this season, but they are still top quality talent, and any one of those other teams around us, I'm sure, would have taken them in a heartbeat. So Reading are certainly boosting their squad. Even looking at the subtractions we've taken away, I think that's overall enhanced the squad. So I think we're on the up. I've probably completely jinxed this now, and you can rattle this off in the end of season highlights package. But for me, I do see the club, not motoring up that hill, but we're certainly slowly chugging up.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the transfers and anything that's more likely to happen in the next section of the show in Newsbites, because it sounds like Gomes is after maybe another player, but certainly some more outgoings to be taking place. Gomes said after the win on the weekend against Forest End that today was a very strong step in terms of galvanising the club again. We must take the second step now. Since I arrived, the players have had a fantastic attitude. They want to win and they want to put the club in its right place. They love the supporters, and that's how it works. We are together like a team. That includes the players, supporters, technical staff and medical staff. We must work like a family, and that's what we are doing. And I think it is very interesting when he talks about galvanising the club. You wouldn't have necessarily thought that a Portuguese manager coming in for a team like Rio Ave would be aware necessarily that Reading was completely ungalvanised as a club. But if he's on the ball in that regard, then that's something we can look forward to being a theme of his tenure. Should it be successful, of course, that is all going to rely on results on the pitch. Speaking of which, we'll go into Newsbites now and we'll catch up on what the other Reading teams have been doing around the country.
The Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Right, let's catch up with the peripheral Reading teams, or the more successful Reading teams as they're often known. The under-23s are back the top of Premier League 2 after wins over Norwich. That was a 4-3 and 2-1 against Wolves. So their sort of Christmas slumber has been shrugged off very nicely. Ryan East with a couple goals and a trip to Old Trafford on the bench for him. We next face Colchester in the Premier League Cup on Friday, then Sunderland on February the 3rd. They're currently 3 points clear on Premier League 2 with one more played. The under-18s, however, not so good. Lost 2-1 to Norwich last time out. They go to Villa on Tuesday the 15th in the 4th round of the FA Youth Cup, pretty much the biggest competition for the under-18s. The winner faces Oxford or Bournemouth away, so
Oxford, please.
Not a bad away trip if we can string that one right. But Villa have a very decent academy, so that'll be a tough one for an out of sorts under-18s team. And finally, the women, they began the year with a 2-1 defeat at high-flying Birmingham. Is a late equaliser for the Reading team, but then an 89th minute winner. So Birmingham are actually doing quite well. It means Reading 5th in the WSL1 table at the moment, 7 points off 4th, and they face Arsenal on Sunday, 27th of January at Adams Park. So that's a pretty big game there with the very decent Arsenal team coming down to Wickham. And that moves us on to the transfers. And let's start on Thiago Ilori, Wim, because Jose Gomes has said that what I feel from this week is that he wants to play for this club. And Ilori, it's been a bit of a weird one, this, because it sounds like Sporting Lisbon and the club who are still floating around with, a couple million here or £1 million there. Reading obviously broke their transfer record at the time to sign Ilori. What's your sort of feeling on this transfer? Because I don't think that we're necessarily in that much of a position to sell our starting centre-back at the moment.
No, you wonder if this is a case of Reading have either got a target in mind who's going to cost them a certain amount of money, or they're sort of stalling while they try and find one. Thiago Ilori has always divided me as a player. I've seen the skill he's got. His pace is electric as well. That game he had at right back, I thought he was really maybe on something there, but circumstances changed, and you can see exactly why Liverpool signed him for such a lot of money, because he's got those technical attributes and physical attributes that you just salivate as a defender. But he's 25 now. He's played 50 odd games for Reading, and 25 of those games have been bad to average, and I don't know, 10 maybe have been excellent, and then the rest are sort of in the good to okay sort of range. And is Thiago Ilori the man you want when you're fighting in the trenches and trying to scrap for every point? Probably not, because he makes game defining mistakes, and when you're not in form, those are the sort of things that really finish you off. Because losing a man or a marker or playing a loose pass, it's just the sort of thing for a low confidence side that saps everything. But if the team's playing well, he's a great player. He'll start attacks, he'll move. And if we are truly on the up under Gomes, and this is the start of something special, you probably want Thiago Ilori as part of that, because he does have that potential still to be a very good defender. If, on the other hand, it's still not going well, do you want to sell him and then maybe get in a Tommy Elphick type, an Alex Pearce type, a no-nonsense, grizzled championship defender that is, not going to do a lot for you long term, but in the next 6 months is going to be important. And then in the summer you make that, you try and find your next Thiago Ilori.
Or a Paul McShane type, who has refuted the reports that he's on the transfer.
Oh yeah, he's still here.
And he is still firmly at the club. So, yeah, I think it's a difficult one. I think, as I was saying on the article that I wrote about us backing the manager's style of football, I think Ilori is the player that you want to keep to do that, because he can pass the ball. And yes, sometimes he passes it straight to the opposition or something, but he's technically sound compared to your Paul McShane's or your Alex Pearce's, etc. So I think I'd like to keep him for now. Whether, as you say, if we're building something towards the Premier League, I think Ilori becomes a bit of a squad player quite quickly if you do seriously want to sign players who can play in the top half of the Championship or Premier League sort of level. So,
yeah.
It's one we'll have to watch at the moment. Something about this, I don't think he'll go, because if Sporting Lisbon are coming in with a £1 million offer, Reading aren't in a bad financial position with these Chinese owners. It's not the sort, unless they came in with 5 million and that was rejected, then I think there might be a chance. But at £1 million starting bid doesn't sound too likely to me. So watch him go on Wednesday, and watch us be left in the lurch.
You've got to have something lined up to feel the need to sell him at the moment, because we haven't got a lot of depth in that position. So you've either got to have someone lined up, or maybe you've got, I don't know, a really great striker that you want to go and sign, and you need that extra 3 million to get that one over the line. Otherwise, if it's just selling it for the sake of, well, Lisbon have come in with a bid and we quite like this amount of money, there's just no point. Ilori for me is that tantalising player on Football Manager that's got a 3.5, 4-star potential, and right now is 2.5 to 3-star, and you just keep playing him and hope he'll reach that upper level. And I guess it's up to Jose Gomes whether he wants to continue on that and bank on him reaching that potential, or if he does want to go for something that's a little more boring but a little more secure.
Yeah, we'll see how that one unfolds. Some transfer rumours to throw at you then. We've had Villarreal's much in the news defender Ruben Semedo, and I remember when I was working for Spanish football that he was quite often popped up as a pretty unassuming Portuguese centre-back that played for Villarreal, signed for them a couple summers ago, and then was involved in the institutionalisation of his football career quite quickly with firearms and assaults and even a kidnapping, which means that Ruben Semedo, Reading target, reportedly, supposedly doesn't have access to a passport at the moment, which might make it quite difficult for him to come to the club. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Then we've also had Joel Pereira, the Man United goalkeeper, and most recently Marc McNulty been linked with Sunderland as a potential move. So Jose Gomes, he said after the game on Saturday that I've given the board a list of things to work on. We'll see what happens. The solution is not with the new players. It must come from the players who started the season. And Wim, that really gives me the sense that there's probably only going to be one more signing coming in this summer. And I'm not really sure what position that's going to fill. Maybe it is going to be centre-back. It's probably not going to be a goalkeeper. It shouldn't be in my mind anyway. Maybe a striker, but we have got quite a few. So it seems like, we're going to settle down and maybe cast off some players, but otherwise nothing special this January.
The big thing has been about getting the squad down to a manageable core that you trust and a group that you can plug any one of those players in and you know what you're going to get, rather than the bloated 30-odd man mess that we've allowed ourselves to get into thanks to various chief executives, bad managers, and what else. So, I guess it depends on how many do end up going, because, if McNulty goes to Sunderland and you get rid of some of the other people on this apparent unwanted group, and then maybe, you might lose someone unexpectedly like a Thiago Ilori, then maybe you do get 2 or 3 in. But look, Joel Pereira, I haven't seen enough of him to judge. Is he going to be better than Anzi Yakola? And more importantly, is he a player that we can bank on to not only be good this season, but keep being good, and that we can realistically sign? I think Brian McDermott, his loan policy was the best, where he would only sign players that were either an immediate instant upgrade or that he could see signing for the club long term. I think that's what we need to get back to. Semedo sounds like a very, very high risk signing on and off the pitch. Not sure it's the time to be making those kind of deals. I don't think we're quite that desperate just yet.
No.
I do think that, for as much as I said, sorting out the entry room and the midfield is important, I do think getting a striker in would be the big one. It really galvanises a team and the fan base when you get that forward in. You look at the impacts that players like Kitson, Martin Butler going back further back, those type of players, when they come in, they just give you that big. Jason Roberts, obviously the big one, the difference that they can make and the way they can transform a team and the way an opposition views you is immense. And I like John Daddy Bodvarsson a lot, but he's still not at that calibre of player where you go in, you do it as a fan, don't you? You sit there, you look at the programme and you go, oh God, he always scores goals. He always scores goals against us. There's not really anybody like that in the Reading team at the moment. Whether Baldock, I think there's some confusion here about whether Baldock is on. What is the latest? Do we think Baldock is on this exile list or is he not? Because I've seen conflicting things in the last 24 hours.
I really have no idea, but all I do know is that he's not in the team and he hasn't been close to the team. I think, has he made one substitute appearance under Gomes? Or nothing special anyway. And
I think someone was saying he was part of the playing cards on the bus or with the squad. And given what we've read about the players that aren't supposed to be in that team unit, maybe he is still involved. But especially if Baldock is on the out, you are looking a bit thin. I think
if you're going to bring in a striker, you have to tread on some toes, and that means probably Baldock going. It means McNulty probably going in reality. Maybe it means sending Danny Loader out on loan as well, just to make sure that if you're playing one up front, you want like 3, probably 4 absolute maximum players that you can turn out. And if you start having players like Sam Baldock's going to be on a decent wage, if you tell him you're going to be 5th choice for one position, then there really isn't any point in keeping him at the club. And he's also, a player like Baldock is one of your saleable assets that, are you really going to get any money for Bodvarsson, given that he actually does score some goals? Do you really want to have to get rid of someone like Yaku Mese just because you've got someone else coming in? You've got to be realistic in a sense, haven't you?
Yeah, the wages as well that Baldock's going to be on are going to be immense, given that he came from the Premier League. He gave up a nice cushy spot in Brighton squad to come here. And again, based on the hearsay and speculation we've got on some of the other Ron Gourlay era signings, I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the players supposedly on the out list were signed under his tenure. So, I think, again, unless you are really backing Baldock, it's probably best to try and move him on. Whether you'll find someone to do that, I guess, is the really tricky one, because apparently they were trying to do it in the summer and not a lot of people were biting. So,
and it's dangerous as well, because you can't, Baldock a little bit too good for League One in a large sense. Certainly his recent career is too good. Send him to a fellow championship team and you're strengthening a rival. You can't send him to Ipswich and have him fight Ipswich to survival and relegate.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just unfeasible, isn't it? So I think I don't know. I think this player like Baldock, with his experience and he was mentioned as someone who's like in and around the squad doing nice little things in the dressing room. So I think it does sound like maybe Gomes has had someone like Nigel Howe just turn around and say, listen, we've at least for the next 6 months, we've got to find a way of making it work eventually, whether that's now or March or whatever. But it's, you pay the money for the player, you've got to find a way of making it work.
Exactly.
So we'll talk a little bit more about the transfer ruminations in the next part of the show, Mailbag, because we do have some questions on it, and quite a big mailbag for
a bulging mail sack, as Busty would say.
There must have been some sort of massive delay between our victories, maybe of a couple of months, and now fans have gone into overdrive. So we'll talk about the mailbag and answer your questions in the next part of the show.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.
Right then, let's kick off with friend of the show, Voldemar Janajak, who says, according to Colin Murray on Quest being the TV channel that now hosts the sort of official Sky Championship highlights, although they are available on pretty much every other sporting channel and YouTube and everywhere these days, because who gives a toss, it's the Championship. Says, according to Colin Bowie, it was a turgid win. What? Says Waldemar. The game wasn't turgid at all. It was lively, full of skill and energy, plenty of chances. Get some new glasses, Colin, to go with your new hair. #unfair to Reading again. There's actually the thing is the BBC report called it a turgid win as well, didn't it? So there's obviously some reporter out there who's very unhappy about having to go to Reading on a cold January afternoon to see a pretty, I wouldn't call it an underwhelming game. I was ill, so I didn't go, but it sounded like a relatively decent game. Maybe they're used to some more foreign climes or something.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe they get to watch, teams like Man City every week, and then they've been sent down to Medeski. I mean, to be fair, maybe it's the other way for us though. Maybe we've seen so many bad games that we as in really, really bad games, that now we can't even judge what's a good game anymore. I didn't think it was that bad, but at the same time, I wasn't on the edge of my seat all the time. And happy birthday to Valdemar as well. He celebrated his birthday at the weekend. Big supporter of the Tilehurst End for a number of years. So happy birthday, Valdemar. Glad you got 3 points. Again, I did think it was lively. It did have moments of skill and energy, particularly the first half, I thought, again, with Ajara, who I really do like the look of. I really hope he continues to show what he did in the first half. And if he does that, I think we've got a cracking little player for the next few months. So, I thought it was a decent enough game. But
probably for the neutral, it perhaps wasn't much of a contest. Certainly in the second half, there probably wasn't much. Because I was listening to it on Berkshire, and Mick Gooding said with about 35 minutes left, or no, it might have been just after the red card with 25 minutes left. He said, well, that's the game. Forest aren't going to get anything out of this. And as a neutral, you probably thought that. Whereas as a Reading fan, we're probably still on tenterhooks saying, oh, God, are we going to beat this terrible team who only have 9 men? Yeah,
again, as I said earlier in the show, I'm not going to be, if you're going, I'm going to watch this highlights of the Forest game again. Can't wait to see those again. But at the same point, I'll remember it with a little bit more fondness. And, it was a game that I was glad I wasn't walking out of the Benesky Stadium going, oh, God, I've just sat through that, which I did under a lot of games under Yap Stam, even when we won. I thought it was a bit better than that. So, a little bit harsh, Colin Murray.
So next, we had a thought from Pedro Ventura, who says that we still need 20 points to win to get us as we were last year, which are still running from relegation. And Tommy sent us in a question saying, do you like it when our players have a scrap on the pitch? Certainly wasn't a turgid moment as Darryl Murphy flew in with a challenge that eventually led to his captain being sent off, kind of ironically. Tommy saying, I love it and I'm glad they have finally shown some passion rather than get bullied like they were under Stam and Clements. I think understand they kind of got bullied a bit, but under Clement, I remember when he first came in, we had about 4 players sent off in the first 4 games.
Yeah, Dave Edwards at Villa, and
yeah, it's a bit 6-1 sometimes, half a dozen. But I think in terms of the scrap, I think it was almost being led by the Forest players by the looks of it. Who one of the Reading players must have said something, because it was a Forest tackle, and then everyone piled in, and that was a sign of, perhaps I think it was more of a sign of what Forest are like in my mind, because they were unhappy and under pressure and losing the game, and that's kind of what fell out of that.
Yeah, I think the nice thing was seeing players stand up for their teammates, which is what you really want to see. I think Fox actually grabbed Moore's shirt in that melee, and that caused Yidam to get involved, and they were keen to sort of defend their players that had been badly tackled, and that's what you want to see. That's when you want scraps to emerge, when players are defending the moral high ground and sticking up for their teammates. What you don't want to see is them getting involved in needless aggro, where they've been goaded into it and they've fallen for it, a hook, line and sinker. Fortunately, Reading were the team reeling them in this weekend, and look, we'll take all the help we can get. 2 red cards, thank you very much. But yeah, I don't mind a bit of a scrap. I don't want it to get completely nasty and fists to be flying, like an ice hockey game. But no, it's good. You want to see that passion. You don't want to see players just accepting the fact that someone's just crunched one of their teammates. You want to see them going, that's out of order, he's my mate. And that was, again, just another little positive sign that things are starting to gel with that unit.
Yeah, and it livens the crowd up as well. And one of the things,
of course,
I've been talking, one of the things that my dad always tells me when he says about the atmosphere and it kind of bubbling under more often than it boils over with Reading fans, is that Reading fans have always been so ready for this team to succeed, and any sense of a tackle or a good shot or even a chance, and the fans they're ready to get behind the team, and those sort of little moments, especially in front of the East Stand as that moment on Saturday was, it builds the atmosphere, and it eventually helps push the team over the line.
Absolutely, and it's just all part of the pantomime and the fun of football. They're chanting the word that rhymes with banker constantly at the offender for the rest of the game, and it just gets that blood going, and then the next time one of your players puts a tackle in on that guy, it's come on, and it just sort of gets it going, and again it shows that the players are caring, they're sort of paying attention to what's going on, and you as fans, that's the moment you sort of live vicariously through them, because you're sat there thinking, go on more, go through the back of him, sort of thing.
And I think I might have heard it wrong on the highlights, but there was a chant of the Nottingham Forest team being dirty East Midlanders who were born out of wedlock. So there was, there's a bit of aggro there, and it's nice to see that out of Reading actually, because we do get, mocked effectively for our atmosphere sometimes. So it's good to enliven the crowd.
And it endears those players, that do stick up for, seeing Andy Yidam sticking up for players, it endears them to the crowd. And the next time they're like, yeah, go on, well done. There's like, well, he's one of us. He's fighting for us, rather than just, he's only doing that because, he's got involved in some, petty squabble over something not important, or, woe betide the sort of nonsense we had with McShane and Williams up at Middlesbrough a couple of years ago. So anything that sort of bonds players, and I'm not saying that every player needs to get involved in a punch-up to make a fan like them, but showing that passion, directing it in the right way, even if it is against the rules of the game, is a good thing and will only improve the atmosphere.
Yeah, a few questions here on the transfer market I've sort of bundled up. Ian Manners, firstly, with Saturday was one of our best games for years, but for me the second goal summed up one of our issues. Yadon put the perfect ball across the goal face for a tap-in, but not one of our players was anywhere near it. Do we need better strikers to be in the right place, or better wingers to cross to someone? Similarly, Scott from the States has said it seems that Yadom has had a lot more touches in the box since Gomes took over. Do we have the wing-backs to excel in this system, or do we need an upgrade in this transfer window? Similarly, Christopher Cordoy says, do you think we could still do with a left-back? Richards has done okay, but he thinks we could do better in that position. And this, I think, Wim, just goes back to what we were talking about in the last section, that if you only have, if you have a big squad and you can only bring in one player perhaps in the next couple of weeks of the transfer window, getting it right is going to be quite difficult, because the fullbacks, if we're going to let Tyler Blackett go, for example, or even Chris Gunter, and you want to bring a fullback in, that would potentially improve the team. You could say the same with the wingers. you could say the same with the strikers, but it's almost like we have to pick our battles so carefully in this transfer window. And I think where we have, so many wingers and we have a decent stock of fullbacks at the moment, it's not the battle that I pick for this next couple of weeks.
For me, Jordan Abita is the X factor on the left back front, and only the medical staff and Jordan himself is going to know how he's feeling after such a long time out. If he's going to come back and we're talking in the next sort of 6-7 weeks being in contention, then I don't think you need to do it. But at the moment, I think we are at that one proper left back area, and I wouldn't be against Gomes going out and signing another proper left back to sort of either to push Richards if you aren't going to back him all the way, or to just come in and we had with the Ryan Bertrand sort of player, and before him signing a Chris Armstrong, someone just to come in and do it. It can make a big difference. Older fans listening to the show will remember how signing Matt Robinson really was one of the big building blocks of how Alan Pardew turned the team around, and to a lesser extent, when Brian McDermott went and signed Andy Griffin. But both those times you might have said, well, we have some options, we have some players, do we really need to do it? But if that player is out there and you can go and get them, because again, I'm not hammering Richards. I think he does have something about him, and he might go and prove me wrong. But right now, I don't think he's a player you go, oh, yeah, well, I'll back him all day long. I want to see him play 46 games. I think right now, anyway, for the player he is, I think we could do better. But again, it's what's your resources like? Who are you losing? Yidom looked up and down this season. I thought he did okay. Few silly errors, but he was in the right place at the right time to provide the cross for the goal.
And he also called out a huge block in the first half as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that is one of those sliding doors moments, really. Because if that goal goes in and Reading are 1-0 down at home to Forest in the first 10 minutes again, is that game over? Is it everything crushed? And so we might look back on that and say, well, but I'm happy with the options at right back. I think between him and Chris Gunter, I think you've got more than enough cover. But I do think that if there is that right left back out there, either for the short term or for the long term, because again, we don't know what Jordan Abita is going to be like when he comes back. Look how long Callum Harriot's been out. If it turns into something like that with Jordan, you're going to need at least one other sort of senior left back. So I wouldn't mind us going out and doing a little bit of shopping in that area.
Yeah, and it's weird when you talk about like Andy Griffin, and also Ian Hart was a very senior left back.
Yeah.
Incredibly senior left back that we went and signed. And the club has always done quite well in picking out experienced players. Obviously, Martin Keown and Les Ferdinand aside, but otherwise generally do quite well in picking out the right player at the right time for that. And a little bit of experience. Paul McShane and John O'Shea, I suppose, is the two ones that you would say is the experience there, but certainly on the flanks, it wouldn't do too much harm if we were to let Tyler Blackett go and we decide to cash in, bringing in someone who can just doesn't have to play every week, or maybe even can't play every week, but just does the basics and can provide that little extra experience just to calm down things. And that's probably one of the things that I'd say Omar Richards doesn't have at the moment, is that discipline that obviously comes with having so many games under your belt and so much experience that you need as a defender. And that's probably one of the only things that I'd say would be useful in this window in a defensive aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I said if there is that Andy Griffin type out there, and I've historically on this show, people have always asked this question: who should we go and sign? I don't know, because you never know who's available. But if there is that player out there, that experienced, solid, dependable, whether it's here, abroad, wherever, you go, this guy, I know he's going to be an upgrade. You go out and get it if he's available, but only if he's available and only if it's the right price. Because as you say, there are enough options to fudge it. It's not one of those things where you go, if the window shuts and we haven't got a left back, we're doomed. It's not at that level, but it can be improved.
Yeah, a couple more questions on the transfer window then. Chris Hartley says, do we think we will see any more arrivals during the window, or do you believe the club are more likely to want to move players on and trim the squad down further? I think we pretty much answered that and said that yes, it will be trimming the squad down is much more important. And Jack Lay says, depending on our next results against Derby and Bolton, do you think we could keep hold of Ilori and Moore, etc., providing that they also see an improvement in where we are on the table and how we play? I think looking long term on the prospect of us looking up the table and moving up the table, I'm still not too worried about clubs signing our players. I think the Brighton for Moore thing, with the hindsight, I don't think Liam Moore would have played more than 5 games this season had he actually gone. And those sort of signings, Premier League teams have lots of money to spend, but even if we finish, 18th, or even if we get up to like 11th, I'm still not too worried about clubs coming and taking our players, because at the end of the day, there was the scouting networks of the Premier League teams, and I can't imagine we'll sell a player to an upper Championship team, because we still believe, the owners all believe, that that's where we should be. So the scouting of the Premier League teams is so wide and varied that I just can't see our best players coming and being sought after, really.
Yeah, the January's a funny one though, isn't it, Mark? Because all it takes is one big injury somewhere up the food chain, and then the dominoes start falling, don't they? And if Moore does have this widely rumoured release clause, you can see a scenario where, Chelsea lose a centre-back, and that means that they have to go and buy someone from I don't know, they go buy someone from Southampton, and then Southampton have to go out and buy someone, and they go and buy more. That I can see that sort of scenario unfolding. So as long as the window's open, you can never be sort of complacent and go, we won't lose them. And in the situation we're in, would you blame, players like Ilori and Moore for moving on? You certainly wouldn't leave a good taste in the mouth if Moore up sticks in our moment of need. But look, they're professional footballers, and if their contract allows them to do it, fair enough. But I think, as we're seeing with Thiago Ilori, the club are very much drawing a line in the sand, saying, look, if you want to take these players at this key point in the season for us, you're going to have to pay for them properly. And they're certainly not selling at the drop of a hat. So I'm hoping we would hold on to everyone that we want to hold on to. Whether they'll want to stay, I think the initial signs seem to be positive. They certainly seem to be playing for him. So hopefully that, if they do have decisions to make, hopefully that'll make any exit plans a little bit harder.
Well, also on the topic of our, the state of our finances, as you say there, with rejecting the bid for Ilori, but we let Dave Edwards go for free. The reports that were out of, I think it's Sky Sports I saw, it wasn't official from the club, but Sky Sports saying that we'd released Edwards from his contract to let him go to Shrewsbury, even though he had 6 months left. And a club in desperate financial straits might try and tease out 100 or 50 grand or something for that deal. So if we're doing that, it does kind of indicate to me that we're not in any kind of financial worry, even if the prospect of relegation is real.
Yeah, well, they didn't cash in on Moore, did they, in the summer, exactly, when they had that big money bid on the table. And if the club had been sort of teetering, they certainly wouldn't have gone and sort of stuck to their guns and not taken the £8 to £10 million bid, whatever it ended up being. They would have taken it. And bearing in mind, they went into this season with that absolutely massively bloated squad. Clearly, they had enough money to cover it, and at least, hopefully anyway, feel safe that they weren't going to fail FFP rules. So, yeah, I think at the moment we're certainly in a strong bargaining position. And, ultimately, if someone does come in with a huge bid, it will be out of our control. And then, again, we go back to what you said earlier. Hopefully they've got someone else lined up. But hopefully the scouting department have been put into it. I have no idea who's on the scouting department anymore and who's recruiting these players. We still haven't got a technical director. So quite where these signings are coming from does remain the question. The rumours of it, is it agent influence? Is it who influenced? I don't know. I certainly have no inside track on that. I can hold my hand to my heart and say that. But yeah, whoever is in charge of scouting and recruitment at the moment has got a lot to do in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Gianluca Nani having gone, and obviously Gourlay gone, and Tevredon being the man before him, and then even I remember obviously Nicky Hammond and Steve Shorey were people that you knew were in there, and McDermott. And Steve Head was briefly there, and the last time I saw Steve Head was in the vet about last year. So it's a bit, as a Woodley native that he is, so it's a bit of a weird one. With in terms of who actually runs, we need the new football manager. We need an update on Football Manager. Then we can go into the scouting department and see who's actually there, if anyone. Maybe they'll say the first day when you take over Reading on Football Manager 19, they'll say we've got no scouting department. Please go and find us someone.
One of those regens that just have a generic computer face. Who's actually in charge.
Judging potential 5 out of 20 by the sound of things over the last few years.
Yeah, no, I think that would go under Ron Gourlay, but we'll leave that there.
Yeah, so final couple of questions then. Mike Hearn saying the new midfielders, Ajari and Baker, we signed, have done wonders in their first appearances. I know it's only one game, but based on that, would we be looking to get permanent contracts? What are your thoughts? My main thoughts on this is that with Baker at least, I think we're going to be waiting on an official sort of FIFA, whoever makes the board that makes the rules of the game, they're going to be deciding in the next 18 months how many players are allowed to be loaned out by anyone. So at the moment Chelsea have like 30 to 40, and they're talking about limiting it on just a general all football level to about 8. Now if that comes in before the summer, or even it looks like it's going to come in, then I think there's a really decent chance of us picking up some of these players. If it doesn't come in, then I don't think it is, because Chelsea is still going to want 10, 15 million for Lewis Baker, regardless, because he's a young English midfielder with a reasonable amount of potential.
It's a double-edged sword, really, because on the one hand, if Baker's stock is probably the lowest it's been for a number of years. I mean, he's going to be 24 this year, so he's not exactly young anymore. But if he goes on and has a really great 6 months of Reading, then you're right, Chelsea will sit there and say, oh well, actually we want 5 to 10 million for this guy. You almost kind of want him to be okay but showing enough potential where we pick him up. But I think he's the more likely. It looks like Liverpool have got some belief in Ajar. That's why they sent him up. He's been playing for Rangers, who are at top of the table, and Steven Gerrard didn't want to lose him. I get the feeling that one would be much harder for us to do. I think he's a lot younger, isn't he? Was he 21? Yeah, he's 21. It was only 21 in November, so I think that one's going to be hard to do. Could we get him on loan for another year, maybe? Possibly. But I would certainly say, I said it earlier in the show, I'd like to see Reading get back to the sort of McDermott school of thought, where we're only signing these players if we can actually get them permanently. Whether it's worth us paying what we need to pay for Baker, I'm not going to sort of say yes or no based on one, cameo against 10 and 9 men. But on paper, if he gets back to the sort of form that, saw him so highly thought of, then I'd be more than happy to see him sign him if the deal's right.
Yeah, and ultimately with Baker, he'd been playing at a Gary Monk and then Tony Pulis Middlesbrough team, which is not going to suit your cultured midfielder. Then he was playing for Leeds with a very good team at the end of the day, which he couldn't get into. Like, I think pretty much very few of any Reading players would get into that team. So that's just how it was for him. And he was at was it Vitesse as well in Holland, where he won a trophy, their first trophy. So there's no real reason for us to decide either way whether we're going to write him off or plunge in with him yet, because this is pretty much the make or break loan spell of his career as I see it.
Yep, 100%. And as like you say, it's one of those double-edged swords where if he does really well, then he gets back onto better teams' radar. So you just kind of want him to be around that 7 out of 10. Just
Plays
good.
Well when the cameras are off.
Exactly that, and then can sort of sneak in while his value is still relatively low, and then he can go and bloom into that sort of 8, 9 out of 10 midfielder.
Absolutely. And the final point we have from the mailbag, and this is one a thought to hold for next week's show, is that Michael Hall said, have you ever debated a best loanee 11? Harneman, Little, Upson and Bertrand to start you off. Now this is going to be next week's pub chat, I've decided. So anyone who has their thoughts on this, get into the Twitter and the Facebook of the Tilehurst End, and also the Tilehurst End at gmail.com for all your thoughts and opinions on Reading. We'll always happily have them. But yeah, I think we're going to save that thought for next week's show and delve into the best loanee 11.
I'll allow you to. You need to set the rules though, Mark, because if you actually look at, you mentioned Hanneman and Little, neither of them were brilliant. Well, especially Little while on loan at Reading, and they went on to have the best. So is this a best loanee in terms of how they played while they were at Reading, or is this the best loanees in terms of what they went on to do and their overall contribution for the club? So
I think it's going to have to be a while they were at Reading, really, because I mean Les Ferdinand was technically on loan, or certainly Keown was technically on loan, and Martin Keown, well done on getting a second mention in the podcast, because I never talk about you normally. So yeah, I think you can't, he's won Premier League, so you can't necessarily just say, oh, he's the best loanee ever because he was the best player. But
if we're talking best, I'll just say quickly, if we're talking best loanee in that, you can't look past Matt Upson. I think we kept it. I can't remember.
It was 17 cheats in a row, wasn't it, or something stupid like that?
Absolutely. Completely turned around his career here. So yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. Very hard to look past. Very hard to look past that man.
Yeah, so that's one for us all to look forward to next week, and also something we'll be looking forward to is the Derby game, which we'll be previewing in Any Other Business.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
Any Other Business.
3 o'clock at Pride Park or the iPro, or I don't know what they call it these days. I think, is it back to Pride Park?
I think it's back to Pride Park, yeah.
Yeah, so 3 o'clock in somewhere in East Midlands is Reading's game against Derby on Saturday afternoon.
Do you mean Frank Lampard's Derby?
Frank Lampard's Derby trademark registered corporation. Yes, absolutely. We cannot forget that, because I don't know, this is a weird game, isn't it? This is a kind of out of sorts Derby now. They look very poor against Leeds on the other Friday night, and I thought that maybe it was the whole Spygate thing, which, please, let's not get into that. But maybe it was that kind of threw them off, and I think they were missing Harry Wilson as well, who's got 9 goals for them this season. Jack Marriott's got 7. Then Tom Lawrence and Mason Mount have only got 4 for them each. Which I must admit, I thought they were going to be a little bit higher when I checked out the stats before the show. So it's this is a real chance of once again being the informed team against perhaps better players, but more out of sorts.
Yeah, and that is the thing with teams that have a lot of younger players and developing players, that they will do this. That they are not the consistent finished article, and hopefully Reading will catch them on that day. I mean, look, just looking at the Derby squad, it's mouth-watering. The players that Martin Waghorn can't, Tom Huddleston can't get off the bench. Malone. There's some really great players in their squad that you'd bite your hand off to get a Reading. I noticed George Evans got a start in that Leeds game.
Yeah, been occasionally off the bench is the first time I'd noticed him, but yeah.
So he started and got booked in that Leeds game. But yeah, as you said, look, they're a team that are very gettable. They've won 1 out of their last 7 in all competitions at the moment. They drew at home to Forest, and they drew at home to Bristol City, to Middlesbrough, Southampton, albeit in the FA Cup. So look, this is a game that Reading, can go out there and win. And the crazy nature of the Championship, Derby got beat 3-0 at home by an Aston Villa team that just lost 3-0 at Wigan. So, and we only have to go back to the very first game of the season. Reading should have won that game. They absolutely should have won that game.
Yeah, and it really set the tone as well, the fact we didn't it?
Absolutely.
I don't think the season necessarily would have been different had we won that game, but certainly for the few weeks after, you'd have thought maybe a bit better.
Who knows? But on paper, I mean, the bookies have got Derby 8-13 to win it, Reading a 4-1 to win this away from home. And given our really great pedigree at Pride Park and upsetting the odds, hashtag gamble aware, but it is one of those things where I'd be very tempted to back Reading, because the form we're in, and like you say, Derby, they're playing as well. Let's not forget they're playing on Wednesday night against Southampton in the FA Cup, so they're not going to be particularly fresh, or at least they're not going to have a fresh bench. I don't know how many changes Mr. Lampard will make, but this is a great opportunity for Reading to go up there. They are going to be the underdogs. They're not going to have a lot of pressure on them. We know we'll have a bit of an extended break after that as well because of the FA Cup, so the players can give it everything. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this one, but again, with the knowledge that if we get beat, they're a top 6 side, and this isn't where we're going to get relegated. This won't be what decides our destiny.
No, and I remember going up last season in one of Jaap Stam's greater days as manager when we beat them 4-2 and absolutely trounced them that day as well. It was a really, honestly, probably the best performance of the season. I think it was even voted that last year. So we do have a little thing about Pride Park. Definitely the only stadium I've been there 3 times and seen 3 victories, which I certainly can't think of any other stadium I've got a 100% record out of for so many games. So, they've won 6 from 13 at home in the league. It presents a chance, but I think you're absolutely right to point out the realism factor that these sort of teams with these sort of players, Derby, I'd be massively surprised if they finish less than or more than 5 points away from the playoffs. If not, I think they'll be within 5 points of the playoffs, if not inside it, come the end of the season. And therefore, at some point, they're going to turn it round and it's going to click. Maybe that'll happen on Wednesday night in the FA Cup. Maybe it'll happen against us or the week after. But we can't be too surprised if we go there, have a bit of possession, have some chances, but ultimately, come up short.
Yeah, and I sort of what I was hinting to with Derby, they are a team that could just as easily get thump us 5-0, or we go out there and pick up a 3-1 victory. They are that unpredictable this season. Lampard hasn't been able to find the overall consistency that they need to really challenge those top 2, but they do have the quality in that team. Players like Mount and the forward options that they've got, where they just have so much quality that they're going to get wins. Even if they're not playing particularly well, they're going to get enough points to grind their way into that top 6. So, look, good time for us to play them. I'm certainly much more optimistic than I would have been, if we were having this podcast after the Swansea game. And that just shows how football can turn around really quickly. Maybe if I was on the show next week, I'll be saying, Gomez, why have you made 10 changes? Why are we playing 5-4-1? And, you've ruined it all. So fingers crossed, it's just steady progression. And again, even if it's just as we saw at Old Trafford, if Reading go up there, have, 4 or 5 good chances and lose 1-0 to a dodgy penalty, I would come away not satisfied, but I wouldn't be down in the dumps and thinking that we're more likely to get relegated. I think that's the key thing. Coming out of the game going, I'm more confident about us staying up.
Yeah, well, it is prediction time then, and luckily this week's show I am joined in the presence of the current leader of the prediction table. You had 1-0 for Reading versus Forest, so your thanks for Mr. Robinson earlier in the show was certainly not personal. They're more for the club as a whole. But you're on 24 points. Hadbag's nailed it for the weekend, so he's on 23 with Ollie on 22. Johnny Williams, who's been very much the pessimist this year, on 18. Sim, who's very much the optimist, he's on 14 after nailing the Forest result. Myself and Westy also got wins, so we're on 14 points as well. Tom Crocker bringing up the rear on 9 points. So with yourself on 24, Wim, I think it's very interesting that if you'd have predicted permanent 1-0 losses for all of the games this year, you'd actually have 26 points and be in the lead, which really highlights how often we lose 1-0 and how bad we are, I think, more than anything. So where are you going to lay your cards down for the Derby away game?
Look, do you know what? I've talked myself into a positive prediction there in the preview section there. I'm actually going to go for a ridiculous 2-1 Reading victory. I've just got this little, probably soon to be dashed and crushed, horrible feeling that we're going to get something good out of this game. And I do think we're going to nick this 2-1.
That's interesting. I'm just mulling over what I'm going to go with. I think Derby at home, I don't think that they're not the finished article at all at home, and I think 1-1 is where I'm going to say this, because I don't think that we're necessarily going to take all our chances and everything, but I think we'll score. So in that sense, a 1-1 draw seems very reasonable to me. So I'm going to say 1-1. So that's going to be I think Ollie's back on Thursday to discuss that game in full and fully preview that. Then we'll be back hopefully probably around Sunday night or Monday night to discuss what happens in Derby. And then actually we'll probably have a weekend off after that, because that FA Cup 4th round we'll have in Barbados. I'll do.
I was going to say warm weather training camp.
Warm weather
surely.
Training, definitely. I think.
Can I come?
A nice podcasting location. I don't know. We'll see if everyone gets on the Patreon tonight. Then I can work out some sort of list, and maybe some of the regular Mailbag people can come along as well, and we'll get some warm weather podcasting in. I think that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think we can all record a podcast around the pool, have little cocktail umbrellas in our drinks. I think that'll be perfect. So yeah, patreon.com/the Tilehurst End, I think, unless you guys have changed it, is the address to go to, and it is really nice to see that so many people are still supporting the website. I still read it all the time. I listen to the shows, and the work you guys are doing is fantastic. So very. And I haven't been on the mention as well that you guys got on the BT broadcast.
Yeah, absolutely. We did drop it into last week's show, and it is nice. It all goes into the same sort of thing for me at the end of the day. Like, we had just a little insight for, pull back the curtain a little bit. Our December traffic report was really good. It was really good to see some year-on-year growth. Obviously, we'd had like a sacking in that time compared to just doldrums. So these sort of things change it. But January, so far, it looks like a lot of people are still enjoying the website. And it's, as you'll know, Wim, it's difficult to, especially in January, it's cold weather, you get in and from work or have you've been out all day or something, and then just to, you've got an article that needs putting up. It is quite difficult sometimes when you know that it is effectively for free that you're doing it.
Yeah,
so and those Patreon things, and every little mention it builds up to motivate us so much.
Absolutely, and I'm not, you guys, I can, again, hand on heart, I'm not being paid to say this, but it makes such a difference if people go out and actively support a project like the Tilehurst End, and that doesn't mean you have to give a load of money. Whether it's £1, a tenner, a one-off donation, it just makes such a big difference, and it just sort of lifts you when you see that sort of hit in the email inbox. And if you can't do that, give your time up, write a guest article, do something, leave a comment in the feedback, just do whatever you can to support it, because just as the Tilehurst End came out of me wanting to start something and fill a bit of a gap in the market and, bring some fans together. It doesn't take a lot for things to fall apart. Again, I'm not putting words in these guys' mouths saying it will fall apart tomorrow, but if you like what you see, do your best to support it and show your appreciation, however that can. So keep up the fine work, Mark. I'm glad I've handed over the keys to good people.
Thank you. And I think I realised over the Christmas podcast that the next place that the Patreon money is going to go in is a bag for life, because the bag that you gave me all the microphones in back in a year or so ago is completely falling apart. So I really do need to protect our investment to the tune of 60p or something like that. So
please do. So that's a lot of expensive equipment there.
as me out into the January sales for that. And this episode coming to a close. So thank you very much, Wim, for popping back on and talking. A decent Reading performance, which isn't something we get very often these days.
Yeah, delighted to be able to come on after a win, Mark. So hopefully there'll be a few more wins and I'll be able to pop back on. I don't know what the short and long term future is. A couple of people have said to me, obviously you hopefully, well, I like to say hopefully, people may have noticed that the Royal Exchange hasn't returned, where I sort of went after sort of handing the keys over. It's not dead. It's in hibernation at the moment. Again, we're hoping that once things have settled down at the football club, maybe we can bring it back. Maybe we won't. But whether that comes back or not, hopefully I'll still show my face around the Tilehurst End whenever my Wimber Jr. allows me to.
Yeah, the podcasting dynasty will live on. So, thank you very much, Wim. And we'll be back next week with hopefully talking about a derby game that lived up to our slowly rising expectations. We can't let them rise too much at the moment. It is only the 14th of January, after one win since, God knows how long it was from before that, but a little bit of optimism and a little bit of that word that Jose Gomes was talking about after Saturday's win, galvanisation coming back into the club and a bit more unity amongst the fans, and generally a positive feeling that we have to string out for as long as possible to avoid that dreaded, and I do call it dreaded, League One descent that Reading are currently facing. Until next time, come on you arse.
You smile, funny how the crumbs always leave a trail, even when it seems it's on your tail. Funny how you always leave a trail. You smile, why do you sit on this side of the tree? Please tell me why don't you break this old biscuit for me? It's